the last person I want to introduce you all to is Heather Waters. She is a town councilor in Manlius, New York, which is in the heart of the state geographically, kind of close to Syracuse. Why am I telling you that? She could tell you all of that. She was first elected in 2019, and I believe she began her most recent 3-year term this January. So let me get Karina here. There we go. Heather, nice to see you. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what got you involved in public service as well?
Absolutely. And I hope you can hear me over the fire alarm that's actually right behind me. Yeah, I ran for office in 2019 and was elected, started serving in January of 2020. Nothing going on then, right? And we were our cohort that got elected, we were Democrats that were running against an all Republican board that had been there for ages. And so we flipped the majority of the board to Democrats in in that 2019 election. And it changed things because people had thought of the town as extremely conservative, a bedroom community for Syracuse, and didn't understand that the whole town had been changing and had been changing for decades, but certainly electorally from like 2009 on. And so we were a sign of the times being elected. We spent a lot of time door to door. So I was sworn in, and I, along with my colleague John and my colleague Elaine, we all swore ourselves in on the town code book instead of the Bible. And that's really what introduced us to the Center for Free Thought Equality and other organizations that were curious, about how this all came to be. And honestly, we just it's who we are. I actually live in Fayetteville, New York, which is in the town of Manlius, and that's where Matilda Joslyn Gage lived and worked for many years. She's the author of Woman, Church, and State from 1893, and she was an abolitionist and a suffragist, and broke with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and with Susan B. Anthony on the issue of religion. She linked, and I'm an avid feminist, and she had linked misogyny to organized religion. So that's sort of where I come from and where my own sort of, atheism and leaning towards humanism tendencies really were grounded in sort of understanding the marginalization of folks, particularly women, through religion. So I was sworn in and started working on the comprehensive plan and had to go deeply working in the community and bringing people together.
That's fantastic. I imagine you were intrigued by a lot of this stuff as a spectator, as someone who goes to, town council meetings, things like that. When you were on the other side and you were able to make decisions on behalf of people, what changed? Did you notice anything that you didn't know going into it? Did anything surprise you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the reliance that we have on the professional staff, our town clerk in particular, and the people who have to make do with these very lean budgets, because of course we're all crushed under the cost of healthcare for all of our public servants and retired public servants. So, you have such a to make real change, you have to raise grant funding, you have to be collaborative. And so the partisanship sort of influences things, I think, for some folks, but it has to end at the door in some ways because you have to work with everyone in order to get things done.
Let me ask you about the partisanship in general. I said this earlier, but I imagine that plays a bigger role, partisanship, religious label, all that stuff. That plays a bigger role the higher up you go in the political chain. If you're sitting on a city council, a town council, my assumption is that those things matter a lot less because you're not making those types of decisions. Mm-hmm. But so what are the big issues confronting you right now in your mm-hmm. community? What mm-hmm. are the things you're all debating and discussing? And when there are differences of opinion, what are those based on?
Mm. Well, I think it's this idea of being insular as a community and having a fear-based approach, or even with sidewalks, there was general sense of not wanting sidewalks in this, this community that was pretty white and pretty affluent, because the idea was people without cars who would be walking along them, and it was racism basically. This idea of not thinking about needing sidewalks for our whole community and what they do, but wanting to keep people out and confronting issues. We had to confront things like the rest of the country. In 2020, we had to look at how our community policing was going. We had to look at sort of whether our housing was always fair, and it wasn't. We had racial covenants inside some of the housing communities' documents, and we'd never faced any of that. How pink lining happened for, I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and so I feel a real responsibility to represent and also make sure that youth in our community understand and have someone they can see that's, in their community that is always making sure there's space for and recognition for who people are and their various identities and ways of being in the world. So those are some of the issues. And then something really big just happened to us. And it was really interesting. We got a request from a private school to have a police officer, so a special, patrol officer inside the school, similar to the force that exists in the public school system, the public school systems actually that our town is a part of. So that meant that we would have public, not retired officers doing overtime work or being paid individually. People are still affiliated with the retired officers or off-duty officers doing patrolling, but an actual police officer in the private school, the Catholic school as it is. And we do not see how it's constitutional by New York State, but certainly also, have a concern about undermining sort of the support for public schools. The school would say, well, we're going to pay and underwrite, this cost for the town. So how is it not fair? And then they haven't gone ahead and telegraphed all the equity issues there that could be for folks and for other schools. But that immediately set off a question about, well, who are these people that don't think that our children should be safe? And a number of us, people are aware of the fact that we would not happen to send our own children to, a number of us to this Catholic school and to schools with a religious affiliation, and thought that it was about a personal agenda. And so that's why I think that, it's really, really important for ASEO to exist, because we could go to our ACLU colleagues and say, how does this work, on a larger scale? And we can go to the comptroller and talk about the policy issues and the alignment with what our purpose is as a local government. But we didn't have anyone to talk to about the fact that people thought we were suddenly bad human beings because we didn't want to prevent school shootings, for example, at a school that had a religious affiliation.
It's very easy to pin the blame on you don't care about kids when it's a very different issue that you're dealing with. You mentioned you're a member of the LGBTQ community, and I'm wondering, as a secular elected official as well, what is the power of that at any level of government? Like, have you talked to people who look up to you because of that? And I'm not saying that as like a humble brag to you or anything, but just I'm sure that means a lot to a lot of people. And what would you say to people who are thinking about running but worried about that aspect of them?
Well, there's a curiosity that you have to be understanding will come, and people are going to be curious about your life. I'm a bisexual woman who's married to a, heterosexual cis, male, right? And so they want to know everything, like, how can you be bi and be married and who knows why? And so there's the curiosity that you sort of have to be prepared and have some bandwidth for and decide, how you want to represent. But also it's really then deciding how you're going to be supportive of your own community and listen and understand. I thought that I wasn't gay enough to be open about who I was because I thought I'd be stepping in front of somebody else who was more marginalized. As somebody who's running for office who's trans, you name it. But then I realized I need the kids we have a way too high a rate of suicide and self-harm amongst LGBTQ youth. They need as many people in the community advocating for them as possible. So that was sort of why that identity became part of my public identity. And then also, I think there's an urgency because the issues need to get addressed now. We can't wait around always. So we had to start looking at culturally how we welcomed folks and made sure that Pride Month meant something to us and we were acting. We had to, we understand that youth in our community are so clearly squarely focused on climate change. So our commitment to climate change represents, I think, our commitment to the now. And I heard other folks referencing that this idea of focusing on where we are now and making things better. And looking at our pain points now, we're in an important position to do that. And yeah, I think that's how it comes together. And also this idea of voting rights and voting access and voting rights comes into play with us because we're thinking of the immediate, what can we do to open up the space? So not making things exclusive. When we hold events in churches, it may be a way to come to the community, but we're not thinking about how the spaces might have a chilling effect for others and chilling effect for civic engagement. So we have to constantly be the nudges, I think, on that, to think, are we just leaning on this because it's easier for us to organize things this way? Or is it actually going to help us see the most people? And so, I think about all of those things, and it's definitely related to opening up space for marginalized communities and people whose voices aren't as easily heard.
That sounds fantastic. And for you already alluded to this earlier, but why do you think people should support ASCO, and why is it important to you? And then I will let you go. And also, I'll ask you one question at the end then.
Well, support ASCO because you're not alone out there as a secular official or someone who wants to support secular officials. And this will give us an opportunity to benchmark, idea share, support each other, share good ideas, and, be prepared to meet the moment, in our communities.
And then, Heather, thank you so much for your time. And then where can people learn more about you? Where can they go to find out more about you?
Sure. Thank you so much. Elect Heather Waters, and I'm really proud to be running with, to be a part of a core group of folks who are all part of the Manlius Democrats. So if you're kind of interested in what's going on in upstate New York with these sleeper sleeper Democrats that have flipped the board, it's also happening in Rochester, New York. And an organization called Local Progress has been a great resource for a lot of us trying to do local work. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it.